Hey guys, it's your boy Wolfie. I could sit here and show you a DPS rotation or a priority system or SimCraft this and SimCraft that. And yeah, I'd be wasting your time because WoW's not that cut and dry. There's mechanics and there's a bunch of things you have to avoid or do to beat bosses and Mythic Pluses successfully or on time for Mythic Plus, right? Cool. So what we're going to do is I'm going to bring you through my thought processes and I'm going to show you what conduits I'm using, what trees I'm using, and we're going to go over a boss fight in Castle Nathria that I think has literally everything you're looking for as a demon hunter, and I'm going to tell you anything that comes to mind that can help you parse on other bosses. This whole video's job is to get you parsing higher. To get those hot 95 percentiles. You know what I'm talking about, them orange and pink numbers. That's what we're always aiming for, right? Disclaimer, mechanics first. Do mechanics first. Your parse doesn't matter as much as you think it does. Make sure bosses are on farm before you worry about parsing. Unless they need that extra fat DPS to kill a boss. You know which bosses I'm talking about. The DPS checks. Those are the big boy. You know what I'm talking about. Those are our bosses, right? All right, so with that, let's go directly into the conduits and explain the first part of doing parsing on bosses, right? Boom. Conduits. For most of your bosses, you're going to be using Naya. She's just the best one overall. She does a lot of damage. It's just increased damage. She's great for most boss fights. Even on some AoE fights, she is superior. I'm going to explain the differences on which one's better and when the other one is better. But first and foremost, thanks to the person who called me out in the last video showing me that Blood Mallet had the wrong conduit tree picked and was giving misinformation to people. This just further proves my point, and the reason why I started making these videos in the first place is that information is wrong all over the place. We have no idea where to find the correct information, and I'm just trying to put them in a place where you guys can find it easily. All right, so if you wanted to know, this is the tree you should be using on Naya. You'd be using the whole entire left side to get burrs. It's apparently more DPS than Naya's tools and poison, and this is better than having a second potency conduit. Also, they figured out later on, which a couple weeks ago I think, that Growing Inferno is doing more single target DPS than Relentless Onslaught. So there's almost no reason to use it, especially since we're going to be getting burrs. Okay, so in case you were wondering what conduit tree to use on Naya, this is the tree you use. This is it. These two are whatever you want. I kind of like these the most, and I kind of like having a little more movement speed. But this is generally the idea you want to go to. This is for most of your fights, even in some AoE fights. Cool. Now, our other conduit tree, Korayn, is mainly for like Mythic Pluses and specific bosses, right? The criteria for what you want on Korayn is basically, is there a target over 75% health for most of the fight? Also, are there many new enemies coming into the fight so you can keep on getting benefits for first strike? So bosses that this would be amazing on are Sire Denathrius, Kale, Council. Fantastic bosses. There's usually a target over 75% health throughout the entire fight for Council. Even against Sire Denathrius, there's a bunch of ads that spawn. The whole like raid has to eat a mechanic and spawn a bunch of ghosts. That's a huge amount of damage. And when new ads come in there, you get 25% critical strike, which is massive for demon hunters. And the best part about this is that when you go downstairs, Remoria is always over 75% health. And Remoria and Sire Denathrius share health. So whenever Remoria is next to Sire, target Remoria and cleave off Remoria to Sire. You'll be doing more damage to Sire and doing more damage overall. That's how you get higher parses on those kind of bosses. And again, Growing Inferno is just outpacing a Relentless Onslaught, and more often than not, our potency conduits kind of suck, so the higher DPS option in the conduit tree does more DPS. So if you're wondering which one you should be using, this is the tree you're using on Korayn. Again, you can use either one of these. It doesn't matter, whatever you like. These are just flavor. And the same thing with these, and that's just up to you. Those are just the options that I chose. As far as I know, Dreamweaver doesn't compete in AoE or a single target, so forget her. But yes, You make those decisions, figure out how the bosses work, and make the best out of the bad. Oh man, I can't talk today. Make the best out of a bad situation. All right, cool. Now we're gonna get directly into this boss fight. I chose Huntsman for this. I think Huntsman's a great boss to use to do this explanation on because it has pretty much everything you're looking for. It has mechanics, has DPS windows, and it makes you make a conscious decision between your conduit and your legendary / build, right? There's tons of mechanics. We know them. We'll go over them as we see them. And this is a weird boss in the sense where you're not doing the AoE build and Korayn as your conduit tree. This boss has enemies in it, but they're not at 75% HP for a long time. And you're not getting the 10% crit chance buff for a long period of time either. So, for some reason, Naya does better, even though it's still a collective anguish build with Cycle of Hatred to use against him. I think it's just a good boss. It makes you think about what you're picking, and the best way to find out these things is look at Warcraft logs and watch the better players do it, right? Cool, so let's open this up and let's go into the boss. First thing I want to point out is everyone thinks the hunt is pretty much you have to dash through targets to get the effect, but as you see here, the hunt actually has an explosion on it. It doesn't only apply the dot on things you go through. When you hit a target, it explodes in an AoE. I've wiped the raid on this before by accidentally hitting by using the hunt on the bear, and it applied the dots to the clones on the side. I didn't know that the hitbox was that big, but as you can see right here, I didn't go through the Huntsman. I hit the bear, and the Huntsman caught the dot on his head, and you can see it over his head with my plater and stuff, right? Boom. He has it. You don't have to be too careful with how you shoot the hunt. It's a much bigger hitbox than you think it is. All right? Don't get your guild wiped because of it. So, just going off using my abilities here. I accidentally hit Blade Dance. There's only 2 targets. You're not supposed to use it. That's my mistake, but it's okay. We have an excess of fury right here, so it doesn't really matter as much. As you see, I am messing up and not using my Glaive Tempest fast enough. Right? And that's my own fault. Don't do that. Pay attention to your cooldowns. It's pretty simple from here on out. Do your mechanics. Make sure you go on the left. Eat one of the Sin Seekers to spread out the damage a little bit. Don't hold your cooldowns too much, right? Like you still gotta use them. You gotta get a feeling for when you know ads are gonna come, right? Now I usually know that Glaive Tempest is a short enough cooldown where I can just throw it down and it'll usually be up by the time the bears get there, right? I know at this point we're getting close enough to where the bear is going to come into the fight, so I'm probably gonna save I-Beam until I can hit both. There you go. I aimed it at him. I got him. I dropped Glaive Tempest closer so he could hit all of them. That worked out perfect for me, right? Oh no, I got a mechanic. I have to do less DPS. This is what we were talking about. Fights aren't clean cut. This is when you have to make it. As you saw right there, I made a big mistake. I beamed as the bear was coming in. That is the wrong play. You're supposed to know that this stuff is happening, but also understand that mistakes are going to happen, and there's not much you can do about it. No one's perfect, but in this specific situation, I should know after that Sin Seeker they're bringing the bear in soon, so I should be looking to make sure the I-Beam is going to hit the bear coming in, or wait for the bear to come in. But that also means that we're going to be pulling in the other bears soon, so I have to make a decision. Do I want to wait for those bears, or do I want to do in the double bears, right? Luckily enough, I still get my Glaive Tempest on him. I do get an I-Beam on all 3, though, which works out perfectly. Luckily enough, that lined up like that. But that doesn't mean that I couldn't turn around and I-Beam the bear in the other position earlier. But that lined up perfectly. Now this is also a 3 target fight here, so I'm using Blade Dance. And 3 targets, Blade Dance is usable, right? Awesome. That is what you want to save your cooldowns for, these kind of situations. I just so happened to luck out that my I-beam was just perfectly timed to get it off on all 3. And as you can see, these enemies are already under 75%, so you wasn't going to get much damage off of them. And you have to use your Fury to pretty much stun with Unleash Chaos. There you go. I saved an I-beam for the bear to come in, popped my cooldowns, waited for it. Awesome. That was well played. I now have to soak. It's part of my mechanic. Try to make the most out of it, right? Eat as many as you can. And I even manually click off things, right? Not in this situation, but you can manually click off Nether Walk if it's going to last too long. Or you can make a macro for it. Boom, double I-beam, great, no problem. Everything's going well. But we have a 4 DPS situation here. I don't have I-beam up. I should have waited, because now this means I'm only going to get 1 I-beam on 4 targets instead of 2 I-beams on 4 targets. But at least I still had my my hunt ready for that, right? But this is also a situation that can completely change off RNG, because you can get a second I-beam because you just have the greatest procs known to mankind. At this point, it's pretty much just use everything you possibly can to get as much DPS off as you possibly can. And that's pretty much the fight. That's it. It's simple things like that. Manage your cooldowns, do your mechanics, do what you gotta do. Make sure you hit as many targets as you can with your AoE, place your glaive tempests correctly, and drop your I-beams to make sure that your actual Vengeance Demon Hunter is hitting them instead of just standing there and missing. Yes, your Vengeance Demon Hunter can miss. It happens. It looks really bad. Also, small tip. Before you metamorphosis, try to make sure that you can I-beam before you meta. That way you can get double I-beam off. It's the best way to do it, right? Boom, meta, I-beam again, get as much damage as you can. Don't miss like me, you get a higher parse. That's it. That's the trick. Apply that to every boss and you'll do well. I hope that helps. I hope that puts an idea of what you should do. It's also not a bad idea to literally record every single boss you're doing so you can go over it like I just did with you guys to find out ways that you can better improve. It'll also give you timers on the bottom. That's my biggest tip on how to improve your DPS or improve your parses. Because as we went over this before, WoW wasn't so cut and dry as just knowing rotations, knowing an opener. There's so many times I've messed up my opener and still had like a 95% parse because like that opener isn't really as important as getting the rest of the fight off correctly. We are not a burst class. We are a sustained DPS class. We don't just play the 30 seconds correctly. We have to play the full 5 minutes correctly. It's a very different beast when you're playing a sustained DPS class like Demon Hunter. So again, I hope this helps. Sorry again for the misinformation in the previous video. I had no idea the Blood Mallet had wrong information like that just out in the open. This is why it's very important to sim yourself. Anyway, I will put the 2 conduit trees in the description so you can just get those pictures down there for future use if that's what you guys want. Yeah, so I kind of forgot to add this to the video yesterday and I didn't want to release it without putting the Fellblade build on here too. So we all know how to play this build for the most part, right? It's pretty simple. You use your abilities off cooldowns, but there's a few abilities everyone forgets about because they're just not thinking about all their cooldowns. Trust me, I make the same mistake. Don't worry about it. You guys aren't the only ones. I just started doing this recently. Don't think that this is like some hidden technique I've been doing since day one. I started forcing myself to incorporate these things in, and I've been doing a lot better. So, what happens when you're playing the Fell Blade is that sometimes there's downtime, and I'm going to tell you what to do during that downtime by showing you during the game. I'm also going to explain the opener because a lot of people don't really like think about that as much, and it's kind of up in the wind. So I found out the positives and negatives of doing the multiple different openers, right? Cool. So as I'm starting, I am a Blood Elf, so I get to use Arcane Torrent, and I'm going to pop Immolation in the beginning. And the reason why I'm doing that is to pretty much get a pool of Fury before we even start the fight. Because when you are metaed and you are bloodlusted, you usually have a surplus of Fury, and using these global cooldowns actually ends up lowering your DPS a little bit, because it could have been another Chaos Strike or another Blade Dance, or it might delay your I-Beam, or might delay your meta. It's just not really a good look during the burst phase. Normally you wouldn't want to do this unless you have Bloodlust, and that's fine. You don't want to use Immolation unless you're like bloodlusting and metaing at the same time. It's hard to explain. Now, we're going to go over the opener for a second, right? You're going to go in, pop everything, use the hunt. Awesome, didn't pull aggro, thank goodness. Now, this opener is very different, right? So this opener has like a positive and a negative, right? The positive is if your second Blade Dance doesn't proc Chaos Blades, you get to Blade Dance again sooner than you would if you waited after the I-Beam. But if your second Blade Dance procs and Chaos Blades, you're going to have less uptime smacking people without Annihilation. Even though your Chaos Blades is proccing, you still want to use another Blade Dance, and you still want to use the I-Beam on meta because you want those on cooldown as fast as possible. Even with the Chaos Blades proccing, you want to use Blade Dance and you want to use I-Beam. It's just more DPS. The way that has the highest the highest variance is probably being I-Beam, Blade Dance, meta, I-Beam, Blade Dance. Just because the second Blade Dance might proc Chaos Blades. But if you're unlucky like I was and the second one doesn't proc Chaos Blades, this actually does more DPS as an opener because you get another Blade Dance faster. Cool, glad we explained that. Now there's a whole other part of the fight. So we actually have two cooldowns that people don't use very often. It's Throwglaive and Fell Rush. Those are actually in your DPS rotation. I hear all the time people missing the days of using Fell Rush as their DPS cooldown. You're still actually supposed to use Fell Rush as your DPS cooldown. You're actually supposed to use it in a fight, because especially when you're using the Fell Blade build, sometimes you get downtime. It just is what it is. It's how the game works. You should be doing things during those downtime. Guess what? Throwglaive is one of them, especially if you take Master of the Glaive. That's why it's actually a DPS increase to take Master of the Glaive. But make sure you're using it during downtime. It's a big mistake to just throw it out just to use it. It is a last resort to be using because you have nothing else. Also, when I'm playing, I like to Fury pool around 60. That kind of feels like my safe, 60 to 80. Anything higher than that, I feel like I can overcap. For anyone asking that kind of question, 60 to 80 seems like the safe bit. Anything higher than that is just a little iffy, and anything lower than that, you won't get enough Chaos Strikes whenever you get Chaos Blades, right? Cool. So let's go over that real quick, right? Obviously, I'm not getting very lucky. Now, what you're going to see is I'm going to notice that I have my Fell Blade coming off cooldown, and I have 2 charges of Fell Rush. They're not doing anything. They're wasted. I don't have the max amount of Fury. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to Fell Rush and directly hit Fell Blade right after. Because Fell Rush, most people don't know that Fell Rush has a shorter global cooldown than most of your abilities. It is not the same global cooldown as everything else. So you can Fell Rush and immediately press a Fell Blade or a Hunt. And it's the same exact thing with Vengeful Retreat. So check this out. Fell Blade comes off cooldown. I see it's there. Fell Rush. Immediately Fell Blade after. 0 uptime loss on the boss. Best of both worlds. We're using Demonic, and we still get to use our mobility skills as a DPS cooldown. It's actually part of the fight. It's actually part of the game. Just make sure you're not running into mechanics, and I would very highly suggest that you make sure you have another mobility skill open at the time. Like, again, you can vengeful retreat into a fell rush and get the damage off too, or just save your fell rushes for when you're fell blade procs. It all works. We don't have that much downtime. As you can see, I don't do it again until way later because, like, I just didn't have much downtime. I didn't really have a reason to use it. And that's okay. You want that to happen. You don't want to have to use fell rush, but you just want the option to be able to press it just in case you do need it. And that's what it's there for. It's just an option to use when there's nothing else to use. And I do have one more tip of like advice for playing this. Learn your hunt range, obviously, like we spoke in Huntsman. Learn the AoE explosion so you're not wasting time trying to position yourself when you don't have to because the AoE explosion will hit them anyway. And make sure you know the duration of the fights, bro. If you know that a fight is going to last a long enough time that you can use your second pot during your second meta, save that meta for an extra minute. There's no reason to rush it. If you can save it and get the pre-pot and the meta at the same time, you're going to do more damage. It's just, it is what it is. Just learn the duration of the fight. I like to do it around 2 million HP. If the boss gets under 2 million with executes and everything, you might not get the full duration of your ult. So anywhere between 2 and 3 million HP is probably a good time to meta. And just like we talked about before, make sure your I-beam is off cooldown before you meta, so you can I-beam, meta, I-beam again, clearly. That's the most DPS you can possibly do. And obviously with your blade dances because you're using the fell blade build. But yeah, that's what you should be aiming to do. Those are the little tips and tricks that you can do to help your DPS with the fell blade build. It's not crazy rocket science, but there's little things like that that mean a ton. You'd be surprised. You might just go to your damage meters and just realize that fell blade did 2.5% of your overall DPS just because you had low downtime and you make the bottom half of your DPS better, so you're more consistent, which is what Demon Hunters are. They're consistent DPS. I hope that helps, my guys. I hope that increases your DPSs. I hope you guys are able to parse better. I want to see you guys getting 90s, 95s. Let me know. If you guys enjoyed the video, please subscribe. If you guys are enjoying the content, make sure you hit that notification bell to see when we post more videos. Smash that like button. I would appreciate it. And please, 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 please leave a comment. I'd love to read you guys' comments. I respond to almost every comment that I see. You guys know this. And if that's not fast enough for you, feel free to stop on my Twitch channel. I stream 6 days a week between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. I usually take off Wednesdays, and Mondays are usually dedicated to WoW. Whether we add more days on WoW is up to you guys, whether you guys show up or not. I would love to see you guys hang out. Feel free to ask me any question there for any game. I do not mind. Or if I'm playing another game during the week and you stop by, feel free to ask me a WoW question. It doesn't matter. It's okay. Ask me whenever you want. And you guys can follow me on Twitter and at me there. I'll respond to things there also. It's awesome. But thank you guys very much for watching. I do appreciate it. You guys are fantastic. Let me know if there's any more videos you guys want to see. Let me know what kind of stuff you want to see in future videos, and I'll work towards it. I appreciate it. But I will see you guys later. Deuces, my friends. Get them parses.